The Weir by Connor McPherson. Adapted by Haley Wendelstedt, Andrew Kerr, Reese Lustelot, and Patrick McQuaid. I am Patrick McQuaid, and I shall be playing Jim.
I'm Haley Wendelstedt, and I'll be playing Valerie.
I'm Andrew Kerr, and I'll be playing Jack.
The Weir by Connor McPherson. Oh, cheers, Jack.
Jim?
Go on, drink the chill out.
This is it. Cheers.
Hey, you know that university, DCU, student is moving into town.
Oh, yeah, that's Valerie.
Who?
Valerie. Oh, I met her the other day while I was out. She's a nice girl.
A nice girl, huh?
No, nothing like that. 2 pints and one of these. Tender.
2 pints, huh?
Are you gonna have one?
I'm debating it.
Well, who's winning the debate?
Fine. I guess I'll have a glass.
Good, man. How about 2? Valerie?
Hi, Valerie. I'm Jim.
It's very nice to meet you, Jim.
Val, do you want a drink or not?
Oh, yes, please.
That a girl. Well, I can't believe it's been 18 years.
Since what?
18 years since I moved down to Carrick.
I remember now. You don't look any better for it, huh?
Oh, yeah? Well, you'll see who'd look better after a round of feisty footwork, huh? Your lungs will be hanging out your back.
Jesus, an old man like me? 10 years between us, and you want to give me a few digs? Business. Killer instinct, huh?
That's an eye for the gap. Exploit the weakness.
Oh, the weakness, yeah. By the way, didn't you have a little run-in with the fairies or whatever their name is before you left?
Oh, God.
You were very brave that time, weren't you?
Come on, Jack.
Come on now, you were great that time.
You're crazy.
You know the fairies pretty good, huh?
It wasn't the fairies. It was the Walsh young one messing with us. It was only a joke, for sure. She's in L.A. now, Naomi Walsh.
Oh, it was Naomi that time, yeah.
Yeah, she was just looking for attention.
Well, what happened?
This was the brave fella.
Stop, it was nothing.
This was a family that lived up by Big Finn's place, the Walshes, where you're staying, Val.
The Walshes. They were only blow-ins. He was a guard.
Blow-ins? Like me?
No, you know what I mean.
Geez, you'll be losing business with those kinds of remarks. Valerie will agree with me there.
She knows what I mean. Valerie's very welcomed. She knows that, don't you?
Leave her alone. You're embarrassing everyone now. Tell her the story.
Nah, sure, you have her in a haunted house already. She wouldn't be able to sleep.
No, I'd like to hear it.
It's not even a real one.
Well, even if it's not a real one, I still want to hear it. I'm always up for a good scare.
She just wants to hear one. Don't be moaning and tell her. Come on.
Fine. There were just a bunch of whack jobs, that's all. There was a house out by where we were, on the other side of the lake. It would have been the nearest place to us, about a quarter-mile down the road. Old Finn used to live on his own down there. Eventually, his family got him into a nursing home closer to where they lived. Then the Walshes moved in. Now, the man was a sergeant in the guard, stationed in the city. He was 50 years old or so, and still only a sergeant, so he was no Sherlock Holmes, you know? It wasn't Walsh of the Yard or anything like that, so they moved into a cheap house. He had 3 teenage daughters and an older son who was married back near Longford. I met them then. I was living on my own then. It was just me and my pa. So I was the bachelor boy, and all the daughters thought I was funny and all rah, you know? So it was around 11 or 12 o'clock one night, and there was a knock at the door, and it was Mrs. Walsh. She was all upset and asking me if she could come in. Her husband was at work, out on a call, and so she didn't know anyone in the area. There was a bit of a trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked, but She says she got a phone call from her youngest one, Naomi, and she was doing the Luigi board or whatever you call it.
A Ouija board?
Ouija board.
Luigi board. I bet she was down in the basement with some boys. Was she, Jim?
Ah, shut up. I meant the Ouija board. You know what I meant. She was doing the...
The Luigi board.
She was. Come on now. She was down at a friend of hers' house, and they were doing the Ouija board. So she called her mom to come and get her. They said they summoned a spirit, and it was after her. Now, obviously, I thought this was a load of BS, but here was the mother saying she'd gone and picked her up. Like, I'm sorry, but I thought it was all a bit stupid. But on the way back, they'd seen something. Like, the mother had seen it as well, like a dog running with the car and running after it. And I thought, there's dogs all around here, you know, all kinds of dogs, but they'd be tame. Like their bark would be worse than their bite. So I wasn't too taken with this story, but she wanted me to come down to the house because they'd gotten back to the house. The young one, Naomi, was going hysterical, saying that there was someone on the stairs. Like no one could see it, but she could. And it was a woman looking at her. And Mrs. Walsh didn't know what to do. They couldn't contact the hubby, so would I come down? I mean, what made her think there was anything I could do? I don't know. But she was panicking, you know? So I got in the car and went down, and Jesus, now, I've never seen something like it. The girl, the young one, was in bits. They had a blanket around her, and she was white. As white as your shirt. Well, whiter, because that's probably filthy.
Ha ha.
But seriously, she wouldn't come out of the living room because of this woman on the stairs. I asked, what's the woman doing? And she said, she's just looking at me. She was terrified. Now, I didn't know whether she was on drugs or drunk or whatever, so I called Dr. Joe. This is Joe Dillion, Valerie. You'll see him in town. He still has a clinic down by the spa. Yeah, very nice man. Where was I? Yes, so I got through to him, and he was on his way, and Naomi was shouting at me to close the living room door because I was out in the hall where the phone was, and she could see the woman looking at her over the banister, like she was that bad. So Mrs. Walsh phoned Father Donald and got him out of bed, and he came down and sort of blessed the place. Thought he'd be more Vatican II, you know, thinking there would be no belief in demons or whatever with him around. But Dr. Joe gave her a sedative, and off she went, you know. And we all had a little drink, and poor Mrs. Walsh was understandably, you know, shaken and everything. But Father Donald told her not to mind the Ouija board, and that it was only Naomi's imagination in all this. And then the phone rang, and it was the Walsh brother who married back in Longford. It was going on about how his baby was crying and how he had it out of bed, and the old lady next door who used to look after Naomi and the other Walsh sisters when they were young, who had been bedridden, was found dead at the bottom of the stairs. She fell down, and they found her, and all right, whatever coincidence. But that night, at home, I was sitting at the fire, having one last smoke before going to bed, and Jack could know the house, the stairs come down into the main room. I had my back to it, to the stairs. And it's stupid now, but at the time, I couldn't turn around. I couldn't get up and go to bed because I thought there was something on the stairs. And I just sat there, looking at an empty fireplace. I sat there until it got bright. I was like a boy, you know? I wouldn't move in case something saw me. I wouldn't even light another cigarette. Like, I was dying for one, but I wouldn't. It was crazy. But when it got bright, I was fine, you know? Obviously, there was nothing there and all, but that was the last cigarette I ever had. They moved away after that. The Walshes. Yeah,
That was when you moved down to Carrick?
yeah. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
Hmm.
Moving down to the lights, yeah?
Hmm. Might be. Might be, all right. Didn't want the loneliness, maybe, you know? You think I'm all crazy now. I'm the nut job, you say. I'm gonna go powder my nose, I think.
That's a wild story, isn't it?
It gave me the chills just hearing it.
And he's one of the most sane, non-paranoid guys I've ever met. I don't know what freaked him so much.
Yeah, I can tell.
Talking about me?
Only talking bad about you, of course.
Well, if you want to make fun of for me of being paranoid, you can't forget about that one time.
Stop. That story was different. It just gave me the chills. That's all.
Wait, what story? Can you tell us?
Come on, Jack. I told mine. Why don't you share yours, buddy?
I really don't feel like going through it again.
Just tell us. We've already started our scary storytelling.
What's wrong? Too chicken to recount your own memory?
Fine then. I'll tell it. So, I remember, it must have been 20 or more years ago, doing a job with Derek. The priest over in Glen was looking for a couple of boys to do some work, and he was down in Carrick in the Arms. He'd come over from Glen, which is kinda odd. Like, what was he doing coming all the way down to get a couple of young workers? But Derek and Donnelly got attached to him. He offered us some money, and we were supposed to go to the church in Glen the next day. I remember I was just dying with the flu. I had an awful high temperature, and my mother kept telling me to stay behind. But there was money involved, so I told Derek, yeah, I'd be there. No problem. Then the next day, there was terrible rain. I'll never forget it. He came to pick me up in his dad's car. God, the smell of sheep in that car was so bad it would kill you. He would stick him in the car and chauffeur him around, you know? And then we drove over to Glen. The priest took us into the vestry, and the job was to dig a grave. Of all things, that day was the removal of the remains, and they needed the grave for the morning. Derek asked him if there was anyone else who could have done it, and the priest kind of avoided the question. He said something about how the local boys were out playing a game. He gave us leggings and rubber boots and the whole bit they had there, and a couple of shovels. And then he put up his umbrella all annoyed, and he brought us out, over to a grave under a tree. It was a family grave, and there were two already in the ground, the mother and the father, and this one was going to be for the boy. Well, he was a man now, like a middle-aged fella. But the priest went off to go to his business and get ready, and then me and Derek started working. With the rain and all, I was just dying with the flu. My arms got sore, and my legs got sore, and I was boiling the whole time. But we got down about 2.5 feet, then we took a break. We got back in Derek's car, and he pulled out a bottle of whiskey. I just wasn't feeling well enough to eat, but I took a good swig of that bottle. It knocked me into shape. We just sat there for a while, listening to the radio and the rain coming down, and then we got back out to work again. We'd just go back and take another swig every half hour or so, keeping it going. And then we saw the Hertz arrive. The weird thing was there were only 2 or 3 other fellows there for the service. Well, of course the removal is mostly a short thing, but to have hardly nobody there for a man who wasn't exactly old, it was just kind of funny, you know? And then when that was over, the priest went off. So me and Derek were the only two there. The dead man was laid out in the church, and Derek went off to get a tarp to put over the grave, and I put a big door over it. And then I was just waiting on Derek when I saw this fella come out of the church, and he walked straight over to me. He was in a suit, so I figured he was paying his respects or whatever. Then he comes over through the gravestones, starts looking around a bit like he didn't know the place. Then he stood right next to me, staring at the grave. I didn't know what to say, you know? He goes, "Is this for so-and-so?" I forget the name. And I said, "Yeah, that's right." Then he says, "That's the wrong grave." I'm like, "Oh, no, this is where the priest said." And then he just looks at me, breathing hard through his nose like he was trying to hold his temper, then tells me to follow him. Then he just walks off. I was just like, screw this, you know. I was cursing Derek, waiting for him to come back. The man turns around and says, "Come on, it's just over here." I was nearly crawling into the grave myself with being so tired and being so sick. But I followed him just to get it over with. And then he stopped at a grave, a new one, a white one with a picture of a little girl on it. And he says, it's this one, right here. And I just went, "Okay, mister, right you are. I'll have it done. No problem. See ya." And he touched the gravestone and then walked off back into the church. Well, I was breathing a few sighs of relief, I'll tell you that. Then Derek came back with the tarp and I said, "Did you see that man?" He didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So I told him and we just had a bit of a laugh at it. Then we got out of there. That night, my fever broke. But I was so tired, my mother wouldn't let me go to the burial. Derek went on his own, I think, but I was in bed for a few days. And one day, my mother brought me the paper, and in the obituaries, there was a picture of that same man whose grave we dug. And you already know what I'm going to say. It was a spitting image of the man I'd seen in the graveyard. But I just figured it was a brother or a relative that I'd met. And then I just forgot about it for a bit. Till one night, Derek told me he'd found out why the priest wanted some Carrick fellows for the job. The guy who died had a bit of a reputation um for being a pervert. Jesus, when I heard that, if it was him, and he wanted to go into the grave with the little girl, even after they were gone, it made me sick to think about. But I just thought of it when you said about Derek's girl. Yeah.
You all right, Valerie? You look a little pale.
Yeah, are you okay?
I'm fine, but that story.
I know, it's a rough one.
No, it's not only that. It's something like that happened to me a little while ago, but without the pervert.
Well, I would hope there would be no pervert.
No, no. See, something happened to me that just hearing you talk about it tonight, it's really important to me. But I'm not crazy. I mean, I'm a fairly straight down the line person working. I had a good job at DCU. I had gone back to work after having my daughter Nina. My husband teaches English engineering at DCU, and we had Nina back in 1988. And I went back to work when she was 5, so when she started school. We would leave her with Daniel's parents. My husband's mother would always pick her up from school and collect her after work. And last year, she was just dying to learn how to swim. The school had a thing where they would ask the class down to the pool on Wednesdays. She was learning really well. She just loved the water and couldn't wait for Wednesdays and swimming. Daniel used to take her to the pool on Saturdays and everything. But for such a bright, outgoing, happy girl, she had problems sleeping at night. She was afraid of the dark and never wanted us to leave the room. One of us would have to lay there until she fell asleep. And even when she did, she would still come sleep with us. And I would say to her, "What's wrong when you go to bed?" In the daytime, she wouldn't care. Night was a million miles away. She wouldn't think about it. But at night, there were people at the window. There were people in the attic. Someone was coming up the stairs. There were children knocking in the walls. There was always a man standing across the road who she'd see. Like, there were loads of different things. The poor girl. I wanted to bring her to the doctor, but Daniel said that she would just grow out of it and that we should just be careful about the books she sees and the things that she watches on the TV and all of that. But she used to be scared even in the morning that mommy and daddy would have gone away in the night and she would be in the house on her own. That was the one she told Daniel's mother. So I told her after that, we would never do that. It was ridiculous. and that if she was worried at all during the day, to call me, and I would come and get her. She knew our numbers and all. She was very good at remembering numbers. But then in March last year, the school had a sponsored swim day, and the kids were all going to swim the length of the pool. And I promised her I was going to go watch her swim, but I just I was late to get out of work, so I was only going to be able to see her after. But when I got there, there was an ambulance, and I just thought, like, the pool was a central remedial clinic, so I just thought that it was someone being dropped off there. I didn't really pay any attention. But when I got in, I saw that no one was in the pool, and one of the teachers was there with a group of kids, and she was crying, and some of the children are crying. And this woman, another one of the moms, told me that there had been an accident and that Nina had hit her head. And they pulled her out of the water and tried to revive her. But she said that Nina was going to be all right. I didn't believe it was happening. I thought it must have just been someone else. And then I was brought into a room and Nina was on the table. It was a ping pong table, and the paramedic was giving her CPR. And the paramedic said that he didn't know if what he was doing, and if he didn't know if she was alive.
Oh my God, Valerie.
And then the man wrapped her up in a towel and brought her to the ambulance. And I got in the back with them, and they radioed ahead and said that they were going to put her on a machine in Beaumont and try to revive her there. But the ambulance man knew, I think. She wasn't breathing, he just knew. And he told me that I wanted to say goodbye to her in the ambulance in case I didn't get a chance at the hospital. And I leaned down and I gave her a little hug. She was freezing cold. And I told her that mommy loved her very much. She just looked like she was sleeping, but her lips had gone blue. And I knew she was dead. It all happened in just a few minutes, and I don't think that I have to tell you how hard it was between me and Daniel. It didn't feel real. At the funeral, I just thought I could go lift her out of the coffin and this would all be over. I think I think Daniel thought that it was my fault. And I don't know if he actually did, but there was nothing that could have been done. He became very busy with work and just keeping to himself. But I don't know. I was just walking around and sitting in the house with Daniel's mother, just trying to think. Just months and months of not talking about it. But then one morning I was in bed and Daniel had gone to work. I usually just lay there for a few hours trying to stay asleep. And the phone rang, and I just left it. I wasn't going to get it, and then the phone rang for a long time. And eventually it stopped, and I was just going to doze off again. But then it started to ring again for a long time. So I thought it was Daniel or someone I knew trying to reach me. So I went down and answered it, and the line was very faint, and it was like a cross line or something. And then I heard Nina.
No.
Yes, and then she said, "Mommy," and I just said yes. And she wanted me to come pick her up. And I mean, I wasn't sure if this was a dream or her leaving us was a dream. And I just said, "Where are you?" And she said that she thought she was at Nana's in the bedroom, but Nana wasn't there and she was scared. And that the children were knocking in the walls and the man was standing across the road and that he was looking up and he was going across the road and if I would come and get her. And I said, of course I would. And I dropped the phone and I ran to the car in just the t-shirt I slept in. And I drove to Daniel's mother's house. I could hardly see. I was crying so much. I mean, I knew she wasn't going to be there. I knew she was gone. But to think that wherever she was, that there was nothing that I could do about it. Daniel's mother got a doctor and I slept for 2 days. But Daniel felt as if I needed to face up to what was happening to Nina and to her being gone. But I thought that he should face up to what was happening to me. He was insisting that I go get some treatment and then I would be okay. But what can help that? What if she's still out there? She still needs me.
You don't think it could be you were having... No?
I heard her.
Sure. You were getting after a terrible shock, Val. These things can happen. Your brain is trying to deal with it. Is your husband coming to town?
I don't think so.
Ah, it would be a terrible shame if you didn't see him because something as you know, that you don't even know what it is.
She said she knew what it was.
Just take it easy, guys.
Stop. I don't want. It's just something that happened. It's just nice to hear what you were saying. It's good to not feel like I'm crazy anymore.
Ah, Valerie, love, nobody's gonna think that. But just, no one knows about these things. Sure, they're not even real. You hear all sorts of old stories all around, but there's usually some explanation for it.
Thank you. I think it's time for me to head home and go to sleep.
I'm very sorry that what happened to your little girl, and I'm sure that she is quite safe and comfortable wherever she is. And I'm going to say a little prayer for her, but I'm sure she doesn't need it. She's a saint, a little innocent. You're a very nice girl, and I hope to see you again. Good night now.
Night, Valerie.
Good night. Thank you.